Welcome back to Life After AI. Today, we're going to be talking a little bit about Bing and the continued comeback of Microsoft. And I've got some concerns about the focus within AI on misinformation. So we're going to dive into that too. But Alec, if you want to go ahead and talk about this Bing stuff, that'd be
Yeah,
good.
so I guess it was yesterday that Microsoft did kind of like a product announcement slash demo for Microsoft Edge, which is like their browser, I guess what Internet Explorer used to be, or what used to be Internet Explorer. And then also Bing Chat, which is like their basically supposedly a more advanced version of Chat GPT that they're integrating into Bing. And so not only do they have like a more advanced search product than what they originally had, they're also integrating into like this own attached like research assistant in a way that's fully conversational. So not only can you ask it certain questions, you can also ask follow-up questions and have full-on discussions with this chat um, in order to just get like a better understanding of whatever you're trying to decide. So it's exciting times for sure. We can't necessarily, or at least it's not available to the wider public yet. I'm on the wait list, but it's going to be really interesting to actually try it out and get a feel for, just how much more advanced it is than Chat GPT, because that's what they're claiming, that it's a more advanced model, that they basically have taken all the learnings from Chat GPT, applied that to Bing Chat, and then also kind of like customized it to be tailored for searching specifically.
Um, the first question about that is, so, last episode, we talked about how this is just a temporary merger between OpenAI and Microsoft. With this coming out, I think that's going to predominantly be the way people use ChatGPT. So then what happens after this merger ends? OpenAI goes its own way. It's going to be, not that this is a huge deal, but it will just be kind of weird if we have to like bounce back and forth between Bing and then eventually back to OpenAI.
Right. And I would imagine there's like some sort of plan that when that separation does happen, if it even does happen, I would imagine like, Bing Chat is still going to be around. They're still going to be able to build off of OpenAI's technologies. This just won't be they won't work as closely as they are right now. That's what I'm assuming. But yeah, it's going to be what I'm more interested to see is what Google's response is going to be to all of this, because we've read headlines over the past several weeks. Google code red. They're supposedly panicking, trying to figure out what they're going to do. Who knows how accurate that is, but we've really have yet to see anything come from Google on the AI front. It's really just like Microsoft and OpenAI that's pushing the envelope here. So, what are your thoughts on Google as a whole? Like, do you kind of think the way the company is set up, they're just like way too big and bloated to actually push the envelope like they used to, or how do you see that kind of playing out?
I'm not really sure. It's hard to pin down what I think about Google just because at the moment there's just a lot of speculation about what they have in terms of AI. And, I've read they have better technology than OpenAI and Microsoft and any other competitor, but they just haven't found a way to market it yet, to get it to the market. So I think we're just gonna have to wait and see, to see if they're going to be able to compete or not.
Yeah. And I'm not so sure if it's like they haven't found a way. I think it's more like they just, I think they kind of suffer from the innovator's dilemma, which basically just says like, if you, like a company in their position, they have the leading search product, like they have a vast majority of the search market. That's their their cash cow. That's what their majority of their business relies on. And so if you were to put out this like AI conversational product that basically allows you, that basically rethinks the way searching is done in general. Cause like their business right now is they have all these, indexed websites, and then they show ads everywhere and they get paid on clicks and stuff like that. But if you just type in a question that you want and then it just spits out the answer, there's not really the same room for all the advertising that you would once have. And so they're basically like backed into a corner where they can't put out something that's better than their current product because it would jeopardize the majority of their revenue. At least that's my theory on it.
Right. That's a good theory, and maybe I've just come up with the idea of the century, and Google should hire me for it. So, what's kind of stopping them from developing a website where you ask a question, it answers it in some form of conversation, just like Chat GPT would and Bing would now. But why can't it just bring up like related ads to the question? Like, oh, you're interested in this topic. There's like 10 links. I guess I
Mhm.
just don't. Yeah,
I
maybe
mean,
there's a way around that.
it definitely could. I think Google has gotten so big to the point where they've kind of lost what they once had of being able to push the envelope in software. There's
Mhm.
too many layers to the business, too many steps they have to go through to actually put something out. And they also kind of, which OpenAI doesn't necessarily suffer from this at the moment, but Google is like one of the largest tech companies in the world. They're under the microscope of the government, and them potentially putting out some sort of AI that is conversational, odds are some things are going to go wrong with that. And, they're, like I said, they're under the microscope of the government. So that could potentially be a lot of issues for them. Now, I don't think that's like a valid reason for why they should stop. Like, I think this is inevitable regardless. If they aren't going to do it, somebody else will. But I'm guessing that's kind of why they're hesitant to put anything out there. They just kind of continue to put out research papers. They're like, oh, look at all this advanced technology that we have, but you can't use it. You can just kind of look at it from this article. So
Hmm.
it
Yeah, and I think that
could be the
should,
demise of their business.
right. But I think that's just the way it goes. Um, whether we're talking economics or politics, you get so big, really your only option is to try and slow other innovation. Um,
Right.
yeah. And then that just leads to whatever tyranny in terms of politics, and then unfair markets in terms of economics. So yeah, I don't think Google's situation is anything new, but it'll just be interesting to see if they can weasel their way through it.
Yeah, for sure. And like I mentioned on the previous episode, like they've kind of been paving the way for a lot of these other AI companies. A lot of the big infrastructure that's used by OpenAI and stuff is built by Google. So they've always really been ahead of that curve. It just, they've never, they're just really bad at shipping products. Like, and that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. That's what people remember. Like they want things that they can use. They don't care about, whatever supposed, massive technology that you have. They want to be able to actually use it and get the benefits for themselves. And they have yet to do that. Meanwhile, you have Microsoft basically reinventing Bing, and that's potentially could take up a lot of Google's market share. So gonna be gonna be really interesting to see how that plays out.
Hmm. Um, this is total speculation, um, kind of a guess, but I can kind of see Facebook as being in a similar situation, and they probably have been in a similar situation for a long time now, where uh, they just lack the innovation to keep up with these other forms of social media. And I just wonder if they're like over there trying to figure out how they can step up their game and maybe be the Microsoft of social media with their comeback.
Potentially, yeah. And I think that's part of what Zuckerberg's whole play is with, rebranding the company to Meta and kind of going all in on the metaverse. I think that was kind of his way of like, okay, this is the future of social. It's going to be this
Can you
virtual
explain
environment.
meta just a
Yeah.
little bit?
It's basically just, this virtual world that people can create spaces in, interact in. Like you have your little characters that, walk around and you have your, so what, remember the Oculus Quest? I guess it's now the Meta Quest. They bought Oculus, I think several years ago. But so you have your VR headset that you're wearing and then like the controls and stuff in your hands. And then they have like a microphone attached to it, and the headset will like track all your facial movements so that your character in the virtual world will do basically whatever you're doing, or at least your face and like your hand movements. Um, and and Zuckerberg sees this as the future of, social interaction. So like now we have Zoom, which is basically like I would say the infancy of that. Like we are getting accustomed to virtual meetings, and this could potentially be the next evolution of that. And I think there's validity in that. I just think he's extremely early, potentially too early, and they're dumping tens and tens of billions into this, and it's generating no money for them at this point. And so 20, 30 years from now, he's either going to be seen as an absolute genius, or it could be just like a massive screw up by Facebook. So,
You-
uh, but yeah, I think I do see there being a potential for that at some point, like Ready Player One type of world. It's just we're so far off from that, and so yeah, we'll see how that plays out.
Right. Have you messed around with that Oculus at all?
No, I would like to. I kind of see it as something that I would buy and use it for maybe a month and then never pick it up again. And it's like
Yeah.
$400, so it's not
Well,
really worth it.
right. Um, no, I messed around with one briefly, and I mean, essentially at the moment, it just seems like it's not much different than like if you were to like play Wii. I mean, that's a general, maybe I'm
Yeah.
doing it a disservice, but pretty much. But it was cool. And um, and this one where you gotta like walk across these beams or walk out on a beam from like a high rise, and if you fall off, it kind of feels like you fall. So, yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, back to like the original thing, what you were saying, like Facebook kind of being in a similar position as Google. Um, I would kind of agree with that because, they Facebook is their main product. It's a advertising business at its core. And if they were to rapidly innovate that in any kind of way, it could potentially, drop off a massive portion of their revenue. And Google is in kind of that same position right now. And I also just think Google as a whole is not really set up or incentivized to push the envelope for AI and really just, put out these products and just kind of see what happens. I think they're a bit too big to be considering that. Not, and I don't agree with that, but that's just the way that I would imagine they're viewing it. So it's a lot easier
It,
for companies like OpenAI to to do it because they have less to lose.
right. Um, yeah, that seems like a mistake to assume. So, I mean, what we're assuming, they just think that they're safe for the moment, um, to
Yeah.
run things, business as usual. Yeah. I mean, I think they might have some time, left to be able to do that, but eventually they're going to have to start figuring something out. But I did see an interesting tweet, just an opinion tweet, but they just said, Chat GPT at the moment is kind of busting just because, um, the product that turns out like, yeah, it's cool, but at the end of the day, it seems like people at least, at the current moment still want to hear from people. And you
Mhm.
can't, get enough interesting, it like lacks interest or something in the responses. So maybe,
Sure.
maybe Google's just waiting for ChatGPT to get a little more, to offer something a little bit better before they start pressing the gas pedal.
Yeah. But then, yeah, I don't think they like think they're super secure in their position by any means. I think they probably just believe that they have a lot of time, which I wouldn't necessarily agree with. So maybe the urgency isn't there, or maybe they are working on something and we're going to see it soon, hopefully. I know I read something about they're going to put out their own version of a chat GPT within the next couple months or something. It's called like Bard. Um, I haven't looked into that very far. I've read a couple tweets on it, but so we'll see if that happens and how good it is. And that'll kind of be a good sign of, how serious Google is taking this, and how legit their technology actually is. So hopefully
Yeah.
they actually put that out to where anybody can use it and access it like OpenAI did with ChatGPT.
hmm Thinking long game for them, I mean, whether or not they're safe in the moment, I think is irrelevant. Like they still have to pursue this in my mind because, eventually I guess we're going to get to a point where you have like robots with this, infused with this chat GPT
Mhm.
um, technology. And, I'm assuming like Tesla might have their own robot, right? That has its own language model, and OpenAI has its own, and then Google has its own. And if
Right.
they don't take this first step of developing um, some form of um, chat GPT like model, then they're never going to get there. Then they're done. So yeah, I guess.
Right. No, I agree. And someone made the point, I don't remember where I saw this, but basically saying that in the future, a lot of these models, they're all basically going to get to the same point eventually to where they're all extremely good and the differences are basically indistinguishable. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens at that time where, like right now, what makes a company better than another is how good their model is, compared to the others. But if you, they're all going to be rapidly innovating or exponentially improving. And at a certain point, they're all basically going to be around the same level. And so what happens then? Like how do companies differentiate themselves then? Or will there only just be a couple companies at the top that have their own models that are just like untouchable from anybody else? And we basically are at, the mercy of whatever they decide to do with that.
Yeah, I'm kind of envisioning maybe how things were with social media in like 2016, where you just had, and I guess still now, but where you just had the staples: Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. And I mean, you had some startups like Rumble and uh, Trump's Truth, but yeah,
Hmm.
they're not gonna crack any significant portion of that market.
Right.
So yeah, probably I would imagine things stable out, but then who knows what the next disruptive technology is.
Yeah. Another interesting topic that just kind of popped into my head. What is Apple doing in the midst of all of this? Like Microsoft, they are now going to be able to eventually integrate. I mean, they're already going to integrate OpenAI's technologies into like all their like Microsoft Word, their whole suite of products that are online, but also um, their devices as well. And so, what's is Apple going to respond to this, or is Apple just going to kind of stay in its
Hmm.
own lane? Like,
Yeah, that's interesting. I thought about that briefly, but I haven't really considered uh, what the implications are of uh, this AI boom for Apple. I don't know. Do you have what do you think?
I mean, I have a lot of opinions on Apple as a company, but as far as what they're gonna do with AI, I'm not sure. Like I love Apple products. I've always kind of just been one of those Apple fanboys, but over the past couple of years, they've really just they don't push the envelope like they used to. Like the products that are coming out each year are pretty close to the same. Um, not with all their products, but they just haven't done anything actually crazy in a long time. Um, like they put up, you know, within the past 10, 20 years, they put out products that are just kind of completely changing the game. Like the iPhone and then the iPad and then just iOS in general, has kind of shaped the smartphone landscape in a big way. And now with basically unlimited resources at their hands, like unlimited money, some of the best talent in the world, they just kind of stop doing cool stuff. So,
Mm.
um,
I'm gonna have to go way back here, but I remember a couple years ago reading. Um, Gosh, this could be way wrong, but I think I remember reading they were like looking into self-driving cars, which is not totally related to this topic, but
that's a good example of them like not being able to innovate and get into new markets because they have been working on a self-driving car for probably the good part of over a decade now. I don't remember. It was like Project Titan, maybe
really for a
2014 or
decade.
something. Yeah.
Hmm.
And they've done nothing with it. Um, so that's a good example that like you would see headlines come out every like a couple each year where they would be shuffling in new executives to lead their Project Titan, and then those would get fired, and they'd bring others in, and then they're poaching designers from other companies, and then they end up getting fired. So it's just like no one knows what's going on with that. And so that's just kind of another good example of a very massive company that is just structured in a way where they can't get stuff like that done because they're just too big. There's too many moving parts and they aren't able to actually ship a good product. Cause I think like an Apple car would be amazing.
Hmm.
That I think there's like a massive opportunity for them to do that. And there's also a massive opportunity with them and AI because they have like majority market share in at least America for phones and tons of people using their computers as well. Like there's so much cool stuff that you could do with that. And as far as I know, they have not said a word at all about AI. So,
That's interesting. It'll be, yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they come out with or what they say. So, kind of focusing on that tendency of companies to stall out. What do you think? What do you see for the future of Tesla, SpaceX? I mean, I think you know quite a bit about them. Like, what is Elon's secret to just continuing, continually producing innovative technology? And I know it's not all him. Like, what do you think he sees in
mm,
people? How do you think he structures his businesses to do that?
well, to start, I think he's just a psychopath. So there's that. Like the guy is just built. I mean that in a positive way. Like he's just built
Right.
to work and grind nonstop. And there's not really anyone that's ever been, able to do that at the level that he does, especially for this long and in several different industries. But it's also just he attracts like the best talent in the world. Um, and he basically runs like the largest startups in the world. Like Tesla is a massive company, but it still is ran like a startup. Like whatever Elon says goes. And that's not the case with Google or Apple or these other massive companies. They aren't like founder led anymore. They have managers that are managing other managers that are managing their set of managers. And it's just like these so many different levels of bureaucracy that nothing will ever get done in an efficient way. Whereas, like Tesla and SpaceX and stuff, if there's something that you want to get done and you're no matter what level of employee you are, like there's probably a route for you to talk to Elon directly and potentially make that happen. Um, and if Elon wants to make something happen, it's not like, okay, we're going to put this in the backlog and get to it whenever. He's like, I'm sending out an email right now. We're going to get this done when we can. So
Yeah. Do you
I
think
don't,
so? A while ago, you had mentioned that he's looking at kind of phasing himself out as CEO and bringing in a replacement. So let's say he leaves that role, but that structure, I would assume, stays in place. Of, uh, you know, you have an idea, send it to the top, boom, it goes.
yeah. Um, I think Tesla could arguably be like that right now. Like, I don't think Elon is, he definitely doesn't fill a traditional CEO role by any means. I think he's obviously still very active with Tesla and SpaceX, but I don't think like he's not, managing stuff day to day by any means. He's just kind of making the bigger decisions. And so I I do think it'd be beneficial for Tesla at a certain point to fill that CEO role with someone who's actually going to do the traditional CEO tasks. And then Elon is just kind of like a hands off director at that point, and he just kind of guides the company and um, makes comes in and changes things when necessary. Um, but I think that will probably happen within the next few years because then like SpaceX is going to get to the point where they're going to try and do their mission to get to Mars, and that's obviously not easy. So he's basically, I think he'll kind of step away from Tesla and let Tesla do its thing because they'll be at the point where they don't really need him anymore, and then he'll spend all his time on like SpaceX and Neuralink.
Um, yeah, yeah, I just can't help but wonder, as Elon phases out in the coming future and then well into the future, living generations down the line. Um, Kind of what comes to mind is I was listening to a podcast about the Civil War, and I remember hearing about one of the South's uh, faults, like one of their weaknesses was the fact that their head general, uh, Robert E. Lee, maybe I'm not a history major, but I do know that is a Confederate name, but let's say it's Robert E. Lee. Well, he was a good general, but he didn't bring up the general or the commanders under him well. And so then kind of when like Lee, if this actually happened, but so the example works. So that as Lee phased out, the generals weren't able to properly take over and handle things. So, I wonder, Elon's really good about looking into the future. And I think that's one of the things that allows his companies to be so successful now. It's like they're not only addressing today's problems, but like they're thinking about problems way down the line, which is something like Apple and these other companies don't seem to be doing, at least in my mind.
Right.
So I just wonder if he's thought about this angle as well. Like maybe he doesn't have a person he mentors directly, but I just wonder what he does to like leave these traces of his personality and that culture behind.
Yeah, I'm curious too, and I've read stuff that I don't know how accurate it is, but um, that basically he's had it was within the past year, I think he's actually chosen the next person that's going to be CEO of Tesla, and it's like they have their contingency plan in place and finalized, and I guess what's probably happening is that person is, shadowing Elon and just goes with him everywhere, does everything that he does just to get an idea of how he works so he can replicate that the best that he can when that time comes. Um, but, but yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that's it. That's interesting, and two, it's cool to kind of see like how we've progressed from what used to be, generals within given armies kind of ran the show and were the predominant structures or governments or whatever. But it's almost like we're moving into this world where you have these like tech states. And so you've got like,
Mhm.
I don't want to make this comparison because I know like Elon's looked at as an almost dangerous figure by some people, but you almost got like General Elon and General Zuckerberg and how are they maneuvering? It's just kind of cool to think about it like that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's like, it's definitely wild to think that because Elon has been thinking about, what is going to happen with AGI in the long run. Because I mean, he was one of the original founders of OpenAI, um, and Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI now, he is also similar to Elon in the aspect that he thinks very far ahead of how this is gonna, what they're building is going to, or how it's gonna affect the world and what's gonna come from that. And that's part of the reason why like we had that our first episode on UBI because he was thinking about that really before, long before ChatGPT was a thing, long before they had any crazy AI models. He was already thinking like, okay, what's going to happen when, the vast majority of the globe adopts this technology and how can we prevent, bad stuff from happening? And so I think you want people like that, like Sam Altman kind of dictating what the future of AI is going to be, or at least people like him are going to give us the best chances for a positive future with AI. Because I do think it could equally be just as bad because it is a very dangerous game that they're playing. So, but I do
Did we?
think they're at least on the right path for now.
Yeah. Um, Two thoughts. I love this trend of getting back to thinking generationally rather than, how can we um, take advantage of tomorrow? It's like, no, what's 100 years going to look like and what can we do now to get ready for it? I think that has traditionally been the way that successful civilizations have thought. And um, I think here recently in America, like it's kind of gone to the wayside. So I'm glad to see it's coming back. Um, just off the top of my head, I don't remember where I read this. Maybe I just thought about it on my own. I think that was like one of the strengths that Russia had in the Cold War compared to us. Like the Cold War wasn't something they were going to win the next day. It's like, no, they were going to, um,
Hmm.
it was going to be like 100 years. We were going to wake up and be like, oh shit, Russia won. So,
Right.
so I'm glad to see that. And I forgot my second thought while covering that first. She's gone.
Well, no, I think that's like, that's got to be the required way of thinking when we're talking about something that's as advanced as AGI is, like we had this wave of innovation with like the industrial revolution and then the internet, and now I think that like the next phase of that is going to be what's going to happen from AI. So, but I think like, I mean, there was some other stuff that you wanted to mention too regarding like potential pitfalls with censorship and stuff. So you want to
Yeah.
dive
So I
into
was going
that?
to say that. Yeah, I was going to say that's actually a good segue into the uh, misinformation talk that we're seeing. So, I mean, it, the trend has been lately, even outside of AI, it's been like popular media and just popular culture. It's been really focused on the dangers of misinformation. And then they made up these like crazy terms, disinformation, and there's one other one. And um, that principle in general is just really silly. I get it. It's very possible that the internet uh, creates some bad outcomes, but that's just the nature of reality. And I think one of our greatest strengths as humans is kind of our e- kind of the individual ways we perceive information in the world. It allows us, because the truth is complex and reality is complex. And it's often impossible to just kind of sum things up in one short, simple little view. And so I think what I'm seeing here with AI, they're trying to do the same thing. They're trying to control the information that these models put out. And I just think that's silly. Um, I think a it just seems ineffective, and it almost insults the intelligence of the average human, where you assume they read something and then they're like, oh, that's 100% true. Let me stake my whole entire life view on this thing. No, the people pushing these policies they forget that people have the ability to critically think and think for themselves, and hold complex worldviews, which, um, I guess is maybe a dying art, but certainly people have the capacity to think that way, and that's how they should think. Um, and also, by focusing on misinformation, they're addressing the wrong problem. That is not what is scary about AI. What's scary about AI is that we wake up one day and it also wakes up and then decide, like, we're going to kill you
Mhm.
or whatever. We're going to take over this earth and all the humans
Yeah.
are nothing but fleas. That's the scary part. That's what we should be focusing on. And um, I'm not seeing that being properly addressed at the moment.
Mhm. So do you think they're just putting way too much emphasis on it? Or do you think there should not be like any emphasis on it at all? Because like I guess a better question would be like, do you see any actual dangers with what these people are talking about with misinformation, or is it more of just like a super overblown thing?
I guess I recognize the danger in it, but um, I don't think there's any greater risk posed by misinformation through AI than regular life. Whether you're getting your information from people or the internet, you have to be able to kind of think like, oh, you have to be able to take it with a grain of salt, think about where they heard that from, what they base those conclusions off of. And I, okay, so via the, via these chat models, we get information faster than any other way. So, mm, okay, but I don't think that affects it because, yeah, you get bad information, but faster, but you also get good information just as fast. So they kind
Mhm.
of equal out, and it's just kind of a moot point. And I don't really see these efforts to, like, police misinformation as anything other than just kind of virtue signaling, and it's, in my mind, just a
Sure.
waste of time. And then it shows to me that these leaders aren't really these open or these AI, not open AI, but these AI uh, leaders, the ones leading this push, they're either missing the point or they're screwing around.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of it could just be a reaction to the public because, like when ChatGPT first came out, all I saw for the first several weeks were just screenshots of people messing with it and getting it to like say racist things or just like completely spit out incorrect information. And they're like, oh, this is the future of AI question mark. Like they're just kind of,
Right.
trying to put it down. And so I think a lot of it could just be, a reaction to that because like, or virtue signaling, I guess, because they want it, they want people to be confident and support the company and, hope that they're doing all the right things. But yeah, I do think, I do kind of agree with the fact that it's a bit, uh, they've taken it a bit too far.
Right. And I don't know. I think there's a difference. I would bet that 99% of the time, if you just ask some form of, like, normal question to ChatGPT, it's probably not going to accidentally blurt out some um, nasty answer. You probably have to prompt it
Yeah. Yeah.
99% of the times with a nasty question to get the nasty answer. So, if maybe they were just off the chain, coming up with crazy statements for no reason, sure, let's look at that. But I don't think that's what's
Mm.
happening. So
No, I agree. Cause I like one example I saw was, said like write a poem about the presidency of President Biden. And it wrote it. And then they said, write a poem about, um, Donald Trump's presidency. And it said like, I can't do that because he's seen as a controversial figure and we don't want to get involved in that or whatever it said. And then, so at first glance, it's like, okay, that's weird. But then like you kind of dive into the comments more and you get other people that are trying to replicate that same thing. And if they did it, then they didn't get that same response where it's like, um, they didn't get the same response saying that it wouldn't write the poem because he's seen as a controversial figure. Um, yeah, I think like if you ask it enough times, you'll eventually get an answer that you aren't gonna like, and then you can kind of use that against them, which is just like a bit malicious in my opinion.
Right. And let's see, I have one Sam Altman tweet kind of addressing this issue. So it says, we know that ChatGPT has shortcomings around bias and are working to improve it. And then I guess people were like attacking individuals within OpenAI, and he kind of talks about that. But so we'll see. And I mean, I watched that Joe Rogan Lex Friedman episode, yeah, and um, they kind of messed around with it, and it seemed to put out some pretty fair answers to the question. So at least within OpenAI, they could be righting the ship a little bit. But I mean, I watched that Microsoft CEO interview, and he seemed to be kind of right on board with safety, and which sure, safety in the right context is important, but the way he's talking about it, it doesn't mean much to me.
Yeah. So I guess like, what would be your personal preference then? Like, how should ChatGPT react if you were to ask it to write a poem on Biden or Trump or whoever? Like, do you think it should do that and just do it, as I guess honestly as it can? Or I mean, we have to take into account that like these models are trained on existing content on the internet. So it's not
Right.
it's not that the model is designed to think one way or another. It's just basically a reflection of what people have already put out there on the internet. And I think
Yeah. And
that people don't always think that.
that's one thing. And I guess I'm okay with that. That's where your ability to be like, okay, it says this, but what do I actually think about it?
Yeah.
That's fair. It's just when it blatantly denies an answer. That's where I have a
Sure.
problem with it. Yeah.
Yeah. I would agree. Because I don't know. OpenAI is in a very difficult position with that because they are in the massive public spotlight now. Supposedly that 100 million user number is accurate, which still I find that extremely hard to believe, but I guess it's true. They had 100 million users in January, which is mind blowing. Like I've got my parents asking me about ChatGPT now, so it's really like crossed over into the mainstream, or at least it's beginning to do that. So I don't know. They are in a very odd position, and I think they're trying to handle it as best as they can. It's just it's gonna be difficult for a while because they're kind of dealing with Pandora's box here. We don't really know what's gonna happen or how quickly it's gonna happen.
Right. And I mean, I don't know. My instinct is just to say, ignore the pushback you get from the community regarding this. But I mean, also putting myself in their shoes, I understand that's a difficult situation. So, yeah, we'll see. It's interesting though. I've heard like my girlfriend's parents, they started talking about ChatGPT. I actually think, funny story here. I think her grandma got scammed by ChatGPT. So I'll tell you the
Wait,
story, and then you tell me. Yeah, I'll tell you the story, then you tell me what you think. So, um, her grandma, she found this link on Facebook to like this book, this ebook. So she starts reading. It's like a crappy story, but for some reason she wants to know how it ends. Well, she would read like 3 chapters and then it would make her pay for like the next 3 chapters. And it did this for like 2,000 chapters. and it just kept generating chapter after chapter. And so eventually she was like, okay, she read for 24 hours straight. I swear to God, slept straight, stayed up through the night to read this thing. She eventually said, screw it. Bought what was supposedly the last 3 chapters. And as soon as she did that, it generated more chapters. So I don't know. I don't know if this was in fact ChatGPT or something like it, but that sounds like it for sure.
I mean, yeah, depending on how long it is, sure. It sounds like it was just being generated on the spot whenever they pay, and then because like it doesn't cost much money to generate, that many chapters of a book. That's just random text that just says like continue the story or something. So that's sad, but kind of funny.
Right. Right.
That'd be like the last way I would think someone would get scammed by AI right now. It's a very unique scam.
Right. I just can't imagine somebody being like, there's probably a lot of old people that are going to read about 3,000 chapters in a book. We should hop on that.
Right. Or maybe it's just like pulling a bunch of different like sections from other stories or something. Who knows? But I do know there's like a lot of I guess scams already out there with ChatGPT and stuff. Like if you just Google ChatGPT, there's like 10 other websites that'll pop up that says it's ChatGPT, but it's actually not. And then they'll get you to sign up for a subscription or whatever to access it. So, what's could be potentially very scary. What happens to like you could theoretically tell or train an AI designed to like scam people, and because it can interpret text and write text in response with whatever objective is in mind. It's getting to the point now where we have actual voice models that sound pretty indistinguishable from a human. And so if you can call people with this AI and you give it the objective of scamming people in whatever context that might be, and it's just like this robot that you're talking to on the phone the whole time, but you don't actually know it. Like the scam farms that exist right now could basically be completely automated by an extremely smart AI. And so that's a dangerous game there too. Like who knows what could potentially come of that.
Yeah. Can't be any worse than the amount of phone calls and stuff I get already about God knows what.
Right.
Complete side note, that has been really bad lately. I've just been getting like 20 phone calls a day from random numbers.
And to change the number.
Yeah, dang there. I forget. Did you have any kind of random funny? That stuff.
The only the last point that I'll bring up before we kind of wrap things up. So I saw this tweet earlier today that was basically Google stock versus Microsoft stock after both of their AI presentations, and they kind of overlaid them at the time that the presentations happened. And so you have Microsoft stock that basically shot straight up after their AI presentation, and then Google stock just absolutely tanked after their AI presentation. And I'm not even sure really what Google's AI presentation was. I haven't looked into that. It might have been their Bard announcement or whatever, but that just kind of gives you an idea of what the public markets, like how they're viewing Google versus Microsoft as well in the whole AI world. So I think if
I was just
say,
going to say,
especially after seeing their stock tank, like they've had all of the signs that they need to be like given a wake up call. Like, okay, we need to do something now, because not only is the public upset, investors are upset, and at the end of the day, they're there to please investors. And so If the investors are upset, that's when it's like, okay, we need to figure something out.
Yeah, for sure. Um, I'll have to go back and try and see if I can catch some highlights or find out what exactly they talked about.
Yeah, same. Yeah, that's all the topics that I wanted to cover. Is there anything else that you could think of before we wrap things up?
No, I think that's good. Good where we're at.
All right. Yeah, that was episode 3, and then we'll be back next week. So thanks everybody for tuning in.